everyone, and welcome to a holiday episode of the Be Brave podcast with me, your host, Greta. In today's episode, I'm so excited to be joined for the second time by Danica Wild. Together, we're going to talk about how to manage the holidays while struggling with an eating disorder. We know just how challenging these times can be, but we also know that there's still joy to be had, even when things feel really hard. I'd like to mention that today's conversation will have a strong focus on Christmas, as this is the main holiday that Danica and I celebrate. Most of today's discussion and advice, however, can be applied to whatever holiday you choose to celebrate. So, without further ado, here is the chat with Danica. Hey Danica, thank you so much for joining me again on the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you back.
No, it's amazing. It's all my pleasure. I'm so excited to be back. It was so much fun last time.
I'm so glad. So today we're obviously going to be talking about how to cope with an eating disorder over the holiday period, especially with Christmas coming up soon. I'd love to start off by talking about something that I know can be really challenging, and I think you find this challenging as well over the holidays, and that is unsolicited advice or comments from family, friends, or even random people during the holidays.
Yeah, so this is something I've dealt with a lot. Last year I was in what some would call quasi-recovery, and I got a lot of comments about my body and how my body had changed. So I've kind of prepared 3 ways that I'm going to respond depending on the situation, whether someone knows that I'm in recovery or struggling with an eating disorder, and how confident I'm feeling at the time, because it can be super stressful. So the first way I'm going to respond is by completely ignoring it. So when someone says something like, "Oh, wow, you look so different this year," I'm going to be like, "Oh my God, has it been a whole year since I've seen you? That's crazy. What have you been up to?" And just completely ignore the body comment. And then the second way is educate. And as much as it's not our responsibility to educate as people with eating disorders, it can be really helpful, and it can be a chance to educate people and have them learn something. So if someone says something like, "Oh my God, you look so much better now," which is the most backwards comment an eating disorder can hear. But I'm going to say something like, "Thanks, but my recovery isn't actually just about how I look. It's about how I feel and how healthy I am in my body. And today I'm feeling really great." So it gives them that chance to learn a little bit more about how recovery is not just about bodies, how it's about mental health and about our physical health and how we feel, not just how we look. And then my third option, if I'm feeling really confident and they're being kind of rude, is to be a little bit sassy. So if someone says "You've gained some weight this year," which I have had as a comment before, which is ridiculous, I'm going to say "Oh wow, I didn't know we were inviting feedback this year. In that case, your pavlova was a bit dry." Something like that.
I love the sassy one. I know it takes a lot of confidence in the moment, especially to use the sassy one, but it can be really empowering as well.
Yeah, it can make you feel like you're in control of the situation, which a lot of the time when people comment on your body and comment on your recovery, you feel a little bit like the inferior person in the situation. So having that confidence to be like, "You know what? F you. If you're going to comment on my body, I'm going to comment on your cooking." As long as you're not commenting back about
literally,
it's a chance for them to understand that body comments shouldn't be like talking about the weather. It shouldn't be something that we just bring up as a conversational point.
It's not appropriate. It's like talking to someone about something really personal, because it is. It's personal, it is individual, and you don't have a right to inherently comment on my body.
No, you have absolutely no right to do that. And people have gotten to a point where it's a conversation starter. It's like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in a year. You've lost weight." It's a way to make people supposedly feel good. And that's the way that we're introducing healthy conversations. Whereas I'm learning now, and I'm actively practicing trying to compliment people on how they make me feel and how they make me be a better person. So I say to my boyfriend last night, I'm like, "Thank you for being so understanding and being able to listen to me when I'm struggling." And it's just a nice way of bringing in compliments without them being about physical appearance. So maybe try that this Christmas.
Definitely. And if you've had that done to yourself as well, if you have someone comment you on, when I'm around you, I actually feel really understood and comfortable. That feels so much better than someone just coming up to you and being like, you look really skinny.
Yeah,
Like,
it totally does.
the magnitude of the comment is so different.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
I was just going to say it's so much more beautiful to be able to feel like you're having an impact on someone's life rather than just being an object in their life.
Yes, absolutely. The only other sort of response comeback that I use, so I love your 3 options. I think they're amazing. I have a 4th one, which is quite similar to your sassy one, and it's just like being bluntly honest. So if someone comes up to you and they're like, oh, you know, you've gained a lot of weight, you sure you want to be eating that much? Being like, well, actually, I had a deadly mental illness, and so, yeah, I do want to be eating this much because that's what's important for my health right now.
Exactly. And being that blunt and being that honest is so powerful because you can be like, what have you done this year? I survived the world's most deadly mental illness. What have you done?
Just been mean to people about their bodies? Is that your goal for this year?
Yeah, trying to make people feel worse on Christmas. Well done.
Yeah, you succeeded. The other things that I think are really important to keep in mind when you're responding to comments like these are that, like you said, to stay empowered, you get to decide how much you share and who you share it with. So for some people that you're maybe not that close with, it'll be that redirecting answer, like you said before, just quickly changing the topic. And for other people, it'll be those more educating answers and really being honest and vulnerable with them. But it's your choice and you get to decide in the moment.
Something that I have always said in peer work is that your story is their honor to hear. So if you share your story with someone, that is a beautiful thing that you get to share and they get to hear. It's an honor for them to hear what you've been through. So you don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't owe anyone a reason why you're eating a second piece of pavlova. But if you want to tell them what you've been through and how you're feeling at the moment, they should be grateful to hear that because it means they've got a special place in your heart and your mind.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important to remember. The other thing that I think can be really important to remember is when you get unsolicited comments more so about like what you're eating, like, oh, do you really want to eat that? Like, that's really high in sugar or things like that. It's important to remind yourself that other people's comments are often more of a reflection on their own internal dialogue than any thoughts they have about you. So even if they're commenting on your body, that just goes to show that they might have a lot of self-esteem and body image issues themselves. And so they're reflecting it on you.
100%. And in the end, it's their problem. Because if you're nourishing yourself and you're allowing yourself to enjoy Christmas, that's your problem. That's the only thing you need to focus on. You need to focus on your health and your well-being and how you're enjoying your Christmas, not what everyone else is doing. And if you're not focused on how many pieces of pavlova Auntie Margaret is eating, why should she be concerned with what you're eating?
Exactly. So I think just in summation, with comments from other people, you just have to remind yourself that you have full permission to do what's best for you and you don't have to appease anyone.
Not at all. You are so right with that.
I think another huge part of holidays that can be really difficult when you're struggling with an eating disorder is getting really overwhelmed by it all. Because, you know, your schedule often changes. Maybe you've gone away on holidays, you have people coming over all the time or people staying with you. And so there's all of this change, which can be so hard for someone with an eating disorder, especially if you sort of rely on predictability and schedule.
100%. Christmas is a seriously overwhelming time for everyone, but especially for people with eating disorders. And the one thing that I'm really focusing on this year, because it is my first full year in full recovery in Christmas. Like last year I relapsed and the year before I was in hospital. So I haven't had a Christmas in a long time that hasn't been sort of ruined by my eating disorder. So this year I'm really focusing on keeping my own schedule and eating my meals and my snacks regularly and adequately. And if someone is having, like, say on Christmas Day, you're having a big Christmas lunch that's got all the big fancy foods or whatever. It's so important to make sure that you're having breakfast and you're having morning tea and then you're having lunch. And if you have a big lunch, that's totally okay. But you've still got to come back and have afternoon tea. And keeping that schedule with your eating and keeping that reliability with your eating is so important to recovery. And doing something like Recovery Record, if you're not already logging your meals, it can be a really helpful way for that overwhelm to kind of feel a little bit less intense, is if you log your meals or even just write your meals in a diary. Write down what you've eaten and just use that as a way to keep you accountable, but a way to keep you also having a schedule. Because that schedule going during Christmas can really throw everything out of whack, and it can really flare up your eating disorder. And the other thing, sorry, I know I'm ranting, but the other thing that I think is really important with keeping accountability during times of change is having people in your life who you can be honest around. Like last year for Christmas, my family thought I was doing really well, and I had kind of relapsed under the guise of eating intuitively. And because I didn't trust anyone around me, or didn't trust them enough, I guess, they weren't keeping me as accountable as they had been before Christmas, because they're distracted, they're eating meals, they don't quite understand recovery, they don't understand how important regular eating is. So having people around you who understand the regularity part of like the RAVES model, and if someone says like, oh, you're having a little bit less than me for lunch, be like, yes, but I'm also having breakfast and morning tea and lunch and afternoon tea, and be there for yourself. Be like, I'm having regular meals. Please sit with me while I eat them, or eat them with me, because I'm really struggling with this change.
Yeah. I mean, even with that comment that you just said before, if someone's, at lunch and they're like, you have a smaller plate than me, say, yeah, I do, and that's none of your business. Like, it doesn't have to be that sassy. You could say it a little bit nicer if you want to, but yeah, I am, and just leave it at that. Or, yep, and I'm going to stick to my own plate, and it would be helpful if you did that too.
Yeah. If it is a disordered reason that you're not putting enough on your plate, really think about that. Think about, okay, I've got my plate model, and if you've got that on your plate and you've had breakfast and morning tea and now you're having lunch, stick to your guns. Be like, I know my body and I know recovery and I know what I need to do to stay in this okay place with my recovery. And if you can honestly say to yourself, without your eating disorder telling you otherwise, this is adequate, then you need to stick to your guns and be like, look, I'm eating what I need to, and in an hour, I'm going to have afternoon tea, and in 10 minutes, I'm going to have a piece of cake, because I know that there's not quite enough carbs on my plate right now. But if someone's coming to you from a recovery point of view, knowing full well what you're going through and what you need to eat, really consider what they're saying. But if you can say to yourself, without your eating disorder intervening, I am eating adequately and regularly this Christmas, then stick to it and be proud of yourself, because that's a huge achievement.
Yeah. I think it's so important that you've brought up this reminder of keeping regularity, because over Christmas, for people without eating disorders, can become really common to start sort of skipping meals and then eating really large portions and overeating during the day, and that just gets normalized. And so then you start thinking, oh, well, should I just be doing that too? But when you're in recovery, that's not as much an option. You have to stick with regular eating. Even if you're working towards intuitive eating, that's where you start. You start with regular eating. And so whilst other people might be doing something else, you just have to remind yourself that, yes, that's what they're doing. We are two different people with two different bodies and two different stories. And so they can do what works for them, and I need to stick with what works for me.
Exactly. And if that chaos starts coming into your mind over, this is too much change, this is too much, even if you're actively eating intuitively right now, come back to regularity and come back to that schedule that you've had in the past or you currently have of eating breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper. And stick to that throughout the Christmas period so the change doesn't feel so heavy and it doesn't feel so confusing.
Yeah. And if you're finding that you're getting quite overwhelmed or really struggling with not knowing how much or when to eat, you can, if you have them, fall back on those supports. Like you were saying, you know, it's Christmas lunch, you don't know how much to dish out. Go to a friend, family member, whoever it is that's your support person that is there. Ask them for help. Hey, I don't know how much to have. Can you dish me out an amount that it would be in alignment with my meal plan or what my body needs, what you know it needs? Because I just don't know and there's too much going on in my head.
Exactly. And like simple things like having a diagram of a plate of food has really helped me in the past, and come back to those basic resources. Even if you're so far into recovery that you're doing amazing, Christmas can be so overwhelming and so much of a struggle that if you need to come back to those basics and come back to those things that started you out in recovery, that's not a failure. All that is you giving yourself as much support as you possibly can in a chaotic time.
Yeah, it's the opposite of a failure. It is setting yourself up for success.
And you should be so proud of that.
I think just one little side note with the plate model and the regularity is that whilst you want to make sure you're eating regular meals and adequate nutrition, you can still eat on top of that. Obviously, you don't need to push yourself or be forced by others, but you are always allowed to have what you want and what you desire. And so if people are passing around Christmas cookies, but you know, you've already had your afternoon tea, you are absolutely still allowed to grab one if you want one.
100%. And the coolest thing about Christmas is that there's this air around joy, and it's, for me at least, I know Christmas is different for everyone, and some people really struggle with Christmas because of family issues or whatever's going on for them. But for me, Christmas has been about joy. I have 2 nephews, and they are my food role models because they're 3 and 6, and they eat whatever they want whenever they want it. Last week they went to the cupboard at 6 a.m. before their mum was awake and pulled all the lollies and chocolate out of the cupboard, made a bowl and put milk in it, and decided that was their breakfast. And that's just, I mean, aside from the fact that that sounds awful, they eat with such joy and with such passion that it's hard not to see that food can be something that you can enjoy, not just need for nutrition and need for fuel.
Yeah. I absolutely love that idea of looking as children as an example. I do a lot of nannying and babysitting, and so I'm around kids all the time. And you can see that innately we all know how to eat. We all know to eat when we're hungry, to eat what we feel like, and to stop when we're full. And you can see it with kids, like they have whatever they want, whenever they want, when their body's hungry, and without input from diet culture or parents or food plans, they eat a balanced diet because your body knows what it needs.
Exactly. My nephews, we have, since I came out to my family about my eating disorder and the struggles I've had with food, my sister's been really conscious about the way that she educates her children and around food, obviously. And the way that we look at food now is that if something has less nutritional value, we just add something with a bit more nutritional value to it. And it's all about a balanced life, not about no foods or sometimes foods. It's about, if you want Macca's for dinner and you're really craving chicken nuggets, that's okay. But chuck some broccoli on the side just to add a little bit more nutrients to that meal. Or in the next meal, make sure you've got some greens. And they eat like that. They eat intuitively. They gravitate to what their body wants and needs at the time. And if they need some steering in the way of nutrition because they're 5 and 3 or whatever, their mum is there to help them. And we can use that. My partner is there to help me. If I'm constantly focusing on, oh my God, I'm having too much of this, he's like, hey, that's actually a normal amount. And if that's what you're craving, that's what you're craving. He's my he's my compass. So find someone that can be your compass. And if you're worried about eating a certain type of food, just have someone around you, if you're lucky enough to have a person like that. I know not everyone is, but have someone around you who can be like, hey, you're doing really, really well, but you actually need a little bit more carbs in this meal.
Yeah. I think the sort of last part of the really getting overwhelmed and trying to stay on top of that is making sure that you're really taking care of yourself. Whilst Christmas is definitely a time to enjoy with loved ones and give to other people, when you're struggling, you have to be a little bit selfish. And it's not selfish in a bad way, it's selfish in a way that's caring for yourself. And so finding things that you can do that help to lessen that overwhelm, like taking time away if you're at family gatherings, just taking some time away from all the talk, away from all the people, have some quiet time. Or it could be making sure that you know what the plans are for the next day, so you feel like you can stay grounded and know what's happening. It could also be having supplements in the house in case you're feeling really overwhelmed. I mean, it totally depends on what works for you and what stage you're at. But if you're worried that you're not going to get adequate nutrition and that this food is all too stressful, it's not a bad thing to fall back on supplements. The most important thing is to make sure that you're taking care of your body.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And on supplements, like I know not everyone has the access to them that I'm lucky enough to have, but I've been like trying to steer away from supplements in my daily life because I want to rely on food for my nutrition, right? But I had a conversation with my dietitian last week that over Christmas I will be putting more supplements in the fridge because I don't know what I will be able to cope with at the time. And I don't know what if my afternoon tea gets disrupted because we're doing presents. I can just run downstairs, have a supplement, have a cookie, and then continue on with my day, and I won't have missed something. But even if you don't have access to supplements, something like an Up and Go or a Milo and milk can be a really good way of getting your nutrition in and making sure you're eating regularly. Like, I'm not a dietitian, obviously, so don't take my advice and then, it goes bad and blame me. But having something there that's accessible and easy and something that doesn't, like if you're a bit afraid of having supplements in front of family, having a Milo, having a milky coffee, something there that is easily accessible and is nutritious enough that it can get you through that mealtime is really important.
You can even just put a supplement in a glass with some ice and a straw and tell them it's a milkshake. Or put it in a takeaway coffee cup, tell everyone it's a coffee. They don't have to know. You do what's best for you.
I'm not going to lie, last Christmas I put Bailey's in a chocolate fortisip and it was elite.
That sounds really yummy, actually. On the note of supplements, it's also just important to remind yourself, if you've never had supplements or if you don't even really know what they are, that's okay too. Everyone's journey is completely different. Just if you've had supplements or certain different things happen, it doesn't make your eating disorder any less valid than anyone else.
No, it absolutely does not. And if you don't have access, I know a lot of people who struggle to get supplements. I get them from a script from hospital that I've had for ages. But if you don't have access to them, that's totally okay. And you can use things like Up and Go, or Sustagen is in Coles and Woolworths. Sustagen is a perfectly good supplement and resource drink that can give you the nutrition that you need in a convenient way that doesn't look too obscure from the outside. Like drinking a Fortisip looks a little obscure, but drinking a Sustagen just looks like you want a chocolate milkshake.
Yeah. I relied on the Sustagen powder in milkshakes for a long time, and that's what helped me. Some people, I ultimately my goal was to work towards just having food, which I'm at now, but I needed that, and that's what got me through, and so that's what I did.
Exactly. It's all about optimizing what you possibly can in a time of so much stress and so much chaos.
Yeah, exactly. Alongside feeling overwhelmed, I think a common feeling that people experience is feeling guilty. And I think this happens for a couple of reasons. I think it happens when people feel guilty that they're not joyful like everyone else, or they feel like they're a burden to everyone around them, especially during a time that's meant to be, or, supposedly meant to be joyful and uplifting and just fun.
Yeah. My personal journey, I'm quite anxious about this year because I have, as I said, the last couple Christmases for me have been really hard, and I feel quite guilty going into this Christmas over how my previous Christmases have been, how well I'm doing this Christmas, and how much I've relied on my family and friends to keep me going. And Christmas can feel like a bit of a checkpoint to compare yourself to previous versions of yourself, and that can really lay into the feeling of guilt over eating what you want, guilt over spending money on yourself or spending money on others, guilt around how you look and feel compared to what you did last year. There's so much that can be kind of misinterpreted by your eating disorder. You can feel guilty for so many reasons, and my only way of kind of combating that guilt at the moment is reminding myself that I'm doing what I need to do to survive the world's most deadly mental illness. And I'm doing what I need to do to survive. And if that means relying on more people, or if that means taking a nap in the middle of Christmas Day, or if that means not having, like, I've had to step away from my job because my mental health was really struggling. So I don't have a lot of money this year, and I'm making a lot of my gifts. So I don't have the money to spend on people, and that's another point of guilt for me. And that's just because my mental health has been a little bit average lately. And I'm doing the best that I possibly can this Christmas, and I honestly believe that anyone in recovery is doing their absolute best. And that guilt can only really be overcome by your healthy self believing in yourself and believing that you're doing what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important to remember. The other thing that I feel is so important to remember is that trying not to put too much pressure on yourself during this time, because I think that can lead to a lot of guilt and a lot of feeling like you haven't been successful or like you're not doing enough, because people put all this pressure on themselves to make it look like to their families that they're trying really hard and they're going really well and I'm eating all these foods and I'm being just like you, when really all of this pressure is making you more anxious and more stressed, and so then you're not going to have as much fun. Whereas if you let the pressure go and just be, you might find that you have a little bit of fun, or you might find that you just float through this Christmas, but it's just one Christmas out of so many.
I made the mistake of making New Year's resolutions, which I generally don't believe in because what's one day over the next, but I stupidly made New Year's resolutions, and being fully recovered by Christmas 2025 was in my list, and I am not fully recovered. I'm not close to being fully recovered because I did relapse last year, and it's so much pressure to put on yourself to be this recovered version of you and to be this version of you that's doing amazing all the time. Because even for people without eating disorders, they're not amazing all the time and they do struggle. And putting yourself to a higher standard than just basic humans is so unfair on yourself. And if you do that, you can't see how far you've come and how amazing you're actually doing.
Absolutely. Just have to remember to be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to take into Christmas this year, is being kind to myself and allowing myself to have moments where I struggle and to have moments where Christmas doesn't feel as joyful as it supposedly should. It's, in the end, it's just another day. And you can make it as amazing as you possibly want, but you will go to bed and you will wake up and it will be another day.
And if it didn't live up to your expectations, sure, Christmas is technically on the 25th of December, but, in a couple months' time, if you're feeling like you're at a great place and you're like, man, I sort of missed out on Christmas, I'm feeling sad about it, throw another Christmas. I mean, I used to live in America, and so I loved Thanksgiving. But now that I've moved back to Australia, we don't have Thanksgiving. And so randomly in the middle of June, we threw a Thanksgiving. It was exactly like Thanksgiving. We had an amazing time. Was it actual Thanksgiving Day? No. Did we all have an amazing time? Yeah. So sure, Christmas Day is just one day, but life doesn't have any rules. If you want to have another Christmas Day 2 weeks from then, go ahead. I think just remembering that you can have fun on other days, you can do Christmassy stuff whenever you actually like, can help to take some of that pressure off.
I love that. And when you see pictures on social media or videos on TikTok about people who have had the most amazing Christmas day with the aesthetic Christmas tree and the big turkey and seemingly doing really well, remember that that's one day in their life. That's just the 25th of December. Their life could look completely different on the 26th of December. And your life can look completely different on the 26th of December too. And I love the idea of doing a Christmas in January or February or March or whenever you feel like you want to celebrate something, just go ahead and celebrate it.
Yeah. It's so nice to remember that life has no rules. I stumbled across a video of myself in the very early stages of recovery a while ago, and I was just saying how it felt so weird not having rules in my life. I was just shocked. I was like, am I really just allowed to do whatever I want? Is this really what life is like? And it's so amazing to have your eyes open to that world. It takes time to realize, and it takes time to sort of break through all of those rules and things that you may have used to do, but it's such a whole new world.
It's so liberating. I made a TikTok the other day where I did a fear food and I pulled out my favorite chocolate that I have been unintentionally, probably slightly intentionally avoiding. And I ordered it on Uber Eats from Coles, and I was like, I can just do this. I have the means and I have the ability. Why wouldn't I just do this? This is cool.
I love the word that you used because that describes it perfectly. It's just really liberating. And so maybe if you can take that into Christmas Day with you as well, you're an adult. There are no rules. Well, even if you're not an adult, there are pretty much no rules to life, except, a couple laws, but it doesn't really apply to what we're talking about. There aren't really rules to life. Most of them we make up in our own heads. And so if you can remind yourself, hey, I think I made up this rule, then just let yourself let it go. Obviously, it can sometimes be harder than that, but just trying to keep that idea in mind.
Exactly. And giving yourself the permission to enjoy the day and enjoy your life can be so hard, but it is liberating. It's so beautiful to realize that your life can be so much bigger than an eating disorder, and it can be so much bigger than the rules your eating disorder has given you.
Absolutely. All of those rules, one by one, make a life so much smaller.
Exactly. And Christmas this year for me is going to be so much bigger than my eating disorder.
And I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to hear about it.
Thank you.
For everyone else going into Christmas, or I don't know, maybe if you celebrate Hanukkah or other holidays, whatever holiday you're going into, remembering that how you respond to other people is completely up to you. You decide what you share with them, how much, and if you need to be sassy, you have our full support. If you need an idea of what to say, I have hundreds, and I'm sure Danica has hundreds of ideas of sassy responses to give back, because the amount of comments I have heard that are just not appropriate is way too many. So if you need some ideas, feel free to come to either of us. And then with getting overwhelmed, remind yourself that taking care of yourself and doing what you need is not selfish. It is making sure that you set yourself up for success. What other things do you think people should keep with them for the holidays?
I think take the pressure off. Allow yourself to grow. but allow yourself to be safe and allow yourself to do the things that you need to do to get through this holiday, because it can be hard. And for a lot of people, it will be hard. And I know that's hard to kind of stomach and hard to deal with, but remember that you can only do your best and you can only do what you have to do to keep yourself safe and to keep yourself healthy. So if that means taking time, take some time. If that means eating an extra meal, eat that extra meal. But just remember that you are responsible for you and you are responsible for your own happiness in the end. So do what you can to make yourself happy.
I think that's such a beautiful message as well. Well, I hope that everyone has an amazing holiday, whatever it is. And I'm really so glad that you could join me again. So thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful as always.
It was such a privilege to have Danica on the podcast again. I'm so grateful that she could join us. Before we finish, I'd like to remind you, like always, to not forget that you are strong, you are enough, and you are so worthy of enjoying the holidays. Until next time, keep being brave.